Holocaust, the mass murder of Jews under the German Nazi regime during the period 1941 to 45. The Holocaust is one of the greatest tragedies our world has ever faced. Rooted in centuries of cultural conditioning, technological manipulation, and pacifism, it can be difficult to fathom how such an atrocity took place. Let's start at the beginning. In 62 AD, the power-hungry Roman Empire gained control of Jerusalem. After rebelling for 4 years, the Jewish populace in Jerusalem were banished while the remaining Jews in the Roman territory were taxed based on their religion. The Romans' initiative forced Jews to disperse outwards, an event now known as the Jewish diaspora. This targeting was the first intentional discrimination of Jews, carving their future as a group of others. Now, let's jump to the Middle Ages. The Roman Empire collapsed in the late 400s, allowing Catholic ideology to dominate Europe. Soon after the fall of Rome came the Crusades, a series of Catholic holy wars with the goal of reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim control. Not only were the wars driven by religious motives, but also by economics. The Crusaders exploited Jews financially and spontaneously attacked Jewish and Muslim communities throughout Europe. A few hundred years later were the first occurrences of Jews being forced to live in separate sectors of town, called ghettos, which were frequently persecuted by Catholics. At the time, the socioeconomic system was feudalism, a hierarchy based on land ownership in exchange for service. Jews were excluded from being able to own land, therefore they could only be at the bottom of the hierarchy as peasants. This led to their creation of a new role, the merchant. In its teachings, Catholicism forbids money lending, so the Jews took the opportunity to fulfill the role of a banker. The Jews establishing power within the banking system played a role in the Nazi distrust of them later on, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's talk about World War I. After 4 years of combat, Germany announced its defeat in the namely Great War. With such a great war came great ramifications. The Treaty of Versailles stipulated that Germany pay crushing war reparations that sent the nation into a state of economic hardship. A decade later, the Great Depression hit globally. Germany was relying on American loans to pay back its World War I reparations, but when the Depression started, the United States demanded that Germany pay their loans back immediately. This spiraled Germany's already unstable economy into a complete catastrophe. Hyperinflation caused banks to close and unemployment rates to skyrocket. Germans witnessed their economy deteriorate and felt they were victims. They thought their post-World War I democratic government, the Weimar Republic, was insufficiently ruling their nation. This building resentment was largely taken out on Jews, of whom they blamed for both the loss of the war and the hyperinflation due to their presence in the banks. With Germany's vulnerable economy and outraged citizens, the Nazis were welcomed as a fresh wave of future prosperity. Their party was described as guided in their actions by a purely patriotic spirit and the noblest of selfless intentions. Hitler, a charismatic and determined leader, convinced the population that he would redeem their internationally recognized greatness and economic stability.
Deutschland ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen. Nun gilt es, das deutsche Volk zu gewinnen.
German citizens were like empty vessels, absorbent of the anti-Semitic Nazi rhetoric. The culmination of all of these events preceding Nazi supremacy in Europe created an ideal social and political climate for the progression of Hitler's agenda of extermination. Looking at the evolution of Jewish discrimination before the Holocaust even started illustrates the discovery of a demented and glacial universe where to be inhuman was human, where disciplined, educated men came to kill and innocent children and weary old men came to die, as articulated by Elie Wiesel. We see from this history the importance of dealing with acts of discrimination and hatred as they surface, lest we create the conditions for greater hatred and atrocity to take root. We must recognize the initial signs of our humanity's division in the present and not allow our resentment to explode into an atrocity as the Holocaust did. Okay, now we have covered the basics of Germany's historical conditioning. While the past events in Europe are significant, it took further manipulation to wholly convince Germans of the Nazi agenda. How was this done, you may be wondering? Well, the Nazis were keen on presenting themselves at the forefront of a new era. They knew that evidence, fabricated or not, would be necessary in order for listeners to believe in their claims. Thus came the term race science. Race science is a pseudoscientific belief that humans are genetically divided by races, with some races being biologically superior or inferior. The Nazis used this theory to perpetuate the alienation of Jews and their being at the bottom of the German hierarchy. Within the idea of race science came additional scientific claims that ultimately led to the oppression of the Jews. Among the most popular was social Darwinism. In 1859, British nationalist Charles Darwin published his book On the Origins of Species. It focused on the process of a species' gradual evolution that keeps only the genetic traits that help them to survive. This theory, called natural selection, quickly became well known as readers made connections between Darwin's book and their society. British thinker Herbert Spencer contributed his own phrase, survival of the fittest, to further the popularization of what came to be known as social Darwinism. Darwin's concept was used to establish a societal hierarchy based upon those most fit to contribute to the progression of their nation. Biologist Ernst Haeckel spread social Darwinism in Germany by applying it to the German belief of the Aryan race's superiority. Furthermore, Haeckel popularized eugenics, the breeding of a racially pure next generation while also preventing those impure from reproducing. The Nazi eugenics program of sterilization intended to eliminate strains that are a burden to the nation or to themselves, and to raise the standard of humanity by the suppression of the progeny of the defective classes.
Ist nur der Staatsangehörige deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten.
Hitler's use of falsified signs to endorse the extermination of an entire group of individuals exhibits the dangers of the pursuit of modernism. Today, technological and scientific advancements play a huge role in the way societal norms are formed. The majority in Nazi-occupied Germany were convinced that modern science justified discrimination against Jews. We can draw parallels between the Nazi use of scientific advancements to allegedly better their society and current movements to genetically modify human predispositions. We must acknowledge that new technology comes with risk and is not always beneficial in order to prevent a lapse in humanity as was seen in the Holocaust. Who wants to think? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to cruise through life without a care, a thought gnawing on one's brain? While it may sound like a luxury, it was this mentality that created an army of bystanders to the Nazi regime. The conformity imposed on the German nation created an expectation of obedience without question, stripping them of their critical thinking skills. Hitler infused nearly every part of German culture with the Nazi ideology to curate information to be aligned with their agenda. The main instigator of this? Propaganda.
Wer selig geworden ist, der weiß, ohne Lösung der Judenfrage keine Lösung der Menschheit.
Propaganda instilled fear in Germans, furthering the divisions between ethnic groups by marking the Jews as alien. The Nazi methods encouraged mindless following, which resulted in indifference and enablement. Bystanders of the Holocaust varied in levels of involvement, some being first-hand witnesses of an event, while others simply failed to speak out against atrocities. All of these bystanders shared a common choice, the choice to not take action. During a crisis, individuals have to make choices quickly, the choice to resist, onlook, perpetrate. The unfortunate reality of passivity during the Holocaust acts as a reminder to consider one's motives and decisions, for they hold immense weight, whether in a state of disaster or not. As stated by historian and activist Rebecca Solnit, what you believe shapes how you act. How you act results in life or death. So, what can we take from all of this? First, we can learn from this history that divisions across cultural and ethnic lines must not be perpetuated, but rather we should embrace diversity as a national strength. We also see that we must take great efforts in society to ensure the veracity of technology, media, and science while being mindful of possible bias and agendas. And perhaps most importantly, we see that being passive in the face of injustice and hate can itself be an act perpetuating such atrocity. When we do not act according to our conscience, we bear the heavy responsibility of the outcomes which follow.